That's okay. I have done it 800 times and I still have errors. So I'll let you guys go. Enjoy it. Thanks for your help tonight, Ryan, as I try to catch up on stuff. And let me know, shoot me an email if you guys need anything after. And I hope it's a blast.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Well, thanks, James.
Keep it real, homies.
All right. See ya. All right. I'm just going to arrange our windows here so you guys are all in the right place. And you guys are good with the format of the debate for your 10-minute openings and all that?
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, cool. All right, I guess I'll start up the stream then, and we'll get this going. Now, I have to make sure that our mics aren't coming through OBS, so, because that would be a real shame. There we go. All right, I'm going to start the stream, and then, I don't know, I guess we hang out for a couple while people filter in.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to pop this up.
That sounded dirty. Free pawn. You're muted.
I know. I hope so.
I do not wish to do that. I can do that. I can do that. That is very pretty. Free queen. Free queen maneuver. Rage quit. Hello, people in my chat.
All right, let's go.
I must see my hair. My hair is important. Amy has a new look. Yes, Amy has a new look.
Hey everyone, tonight we're going to be debating whether Mormonism is true. And to kick us off with our 10-minute opening, we have Kyle on the side of Mormon. So Kyle, I'm going to kick it over to you for your 10-minute opening, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share screen then.
All right.
Okay, hopefully we can see this. Really happy to be here. Thank you for having me. This is my favorite subject to talk about of all time. So,
can you zoom in a little bit? It's kind of small.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Much better.
Here, this is just a basic definition of science, and I just wanted to start out by establishing some really basic common ground. So here we have science means just systematized knowledge in general. TJump, do you agree with that?
What was the question?
Science means systematized knowledge in general. Do you agree with that definition?
Science is a method to gain knowledge. I don't think science is knowledge.
Okay, so you don't agree with this definition.
Science is a way to gain knowledge. It is not knowledge itself.
Okay, so there goes branch of knowledge of study, systematic knowledge, any of branches of knowledge, systematized knowledge. Okay, so yeah, you're just kind of going off of something completely different there. You're kind of referring to the scientific method. So it's a method.
Science is a
that
method.
science.
There is no like science knowledge. Science is a method, and that method gives us facts, which are then called scientific facts. But science is the method. Like,
Okay, so you don't agree with any of these definitions then?
no, those are all agreeing with me.
Systematized knowledge in general is a method.
Yes, systematized. A system is a method. System and method are the same thing. Those are synonyms.
Okay, so it's not just a way it's organized. The systematized is different than organized.
No, system and method are synonyms.
System and method are synonyms. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And over here, I've got the definition of evidence. I like something that makes plain or clear an indication or sign. His flushed look was visible evidence of his fever. Or I could say, my head felt warm, which was evidence that I might have a fever. So it's not for sure, my hands might just be cold because I'm nervous or something like that, but it's not proof that I have a fever. It's just a sign or indication that this might be so. Do you agree with that definition?
Sort of. I would say I would actually use the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy definitions. They're a lot better than the thesaurus.com. But the
So this is
definition of
just
evidence,
dictionary.com.
well, the definition of evidence is anything that can increase the probability of a proposition being true or false. That is evidence.
Anything that can increase the probability of it being true or false.
Yeah.
Okay. And so someone's head feeling warm, that is
Increases the probability they have a fever. Yes.
okay. Okay. I think that'll work. So over here, I'm going to address something that's going to be a little bit out there, but I promise you I'll tie it right back in here. This is from the Onondagan creation story. It's part of the Iroquois Nation's creation story. And it's called The Earth on the Turtle's Back. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I have heard of that.
Okay, so we've got the Earth on the Turtle's Back. Native American, they're like around the Great Lakes area of the United States. And in this story, we have this creation story goes as there's a sky people, people who live up in the sky. And this woman has a dream. And in this dream, she sees a tree and gets this big prompting that she needs to uproot the tree. And so she goes and tells the sky chief. The sky chief says, yes, we need to pay attention to our dreams. And so they go with the help of the sky chief. She uproots the tree. And all of a sudden, when they uproot the tree, they find this hole in the ground. And that leads down to this other world, basically, that's been beneath their feet this whole time. And as she's looking into the hole, she falls down to this hole. And then the animals come up to rescue her. So all these swans come up to rescue her and protecting her as she's falling. And then there's a turtle there and a bunch of animals. Oh, we got to go rescue her. And so there's a muskrat that dives way down deep to pick up some earth. And he goes and puts that earth on the back of this turtle. And so, okay, that's interesting. But there's multiple versions of this story. We have this one where the woman has this dream that's saying that's what she needs to do. But there's another version that comes from a different textbook. And this textbook, the woman was more of a troublemaker and they kind of villainize her. She's trying to go find some different food to eat. And so it wasn't really a neutral happening for this fall to happen. But as we look at like the main idea here is that there are variations in the same story. They're both two stories that come from the same tribe, but they're slightly different. However, as we really kind of dive into it and take a look at the finer details, we see a lot of similarities between this and just the book of Genesis chapter 1, which is I'm sure you're familiar with the Genesis creation story and how things were made. But in there's a woman who interacts with, I guess this is Genesis chapter 3 that I'm kind of diving into now, but there's a woman who interacts with the tree, and then there's the fall of mankind. And, but there's a slight variation in here because over here with Earth on the Turtle's Back, there's the animals that are there to kind of protect and watch over the the people, but it's reversed in the book of Genesis, where man has dominion over all the animals, but over here with the Onondaga story, it's completely reversed. It's, oh no, the animals are here and they have dominion over man. Man wouldn't be here without the animals. And it's kind of a really kind of cool influx there. I think it's the right word. Just kind of, you can see the mirror image almost, but with just some slight variations. And that's kind of how a lot of religions go. They all started off with one basic origin story, and then they kind of split off over time and sometimes it's intentional and other times it's not so intentional. Sometimes people just kind of slip of the tongue. Oops, my memory isn't perfect, kind of a thing. And then there's other instances. Oh, well, I don't really like the idea of man having dominion over all the animals. I think animals end up helping, and so they feel more inclined to have more respect for the animals, and so they kind of reverse it in that way. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but that's really some strong evidence here that the two stories were from the same origin, and then they just kind of splintered off over time when we kind of see the common features. Now, this next one I'm going to show you, this is from a codex, and this is an Aztec human sacrifice ritual. I hope you can see that big enough. So here we have the priest, and he's ripping the heart out of his sacrifice. And as you look at that, okay, they've taken the blood of this human sacrifice and they've marked the blood on the lintel piece and on the posts in the background. Blood on the lintel piece and the posts in the background. Just a codex. Yeah. And this is Central America, over in the Mexico area. And yeah, that part really stood out to me because that's something we directly see in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus. That's what Moses did in the Passover, was he took the blood of the lamb and he marked it on the lintel piece. And so it's very, very specific. But this is a human sacrifice instead of a sheep. But when we read the Book of Mormon, there comes a time where they say, where Jesus comes to the Americas and says, I will no longer accept the offering of blood. I don't want any more animal sacrifices. That's to be done away. And so in the Book of Mormon, we find that it says right here, and ye shall offer up unto me no more the shedding of blood. Yea, your sacrifices and your burnt offerings shall be done away, for I will accept none of your sacrifices and your burnt offerings. And ye shall offer for me a sacrifice unto me of a broken heart and a contrite spirit. And whoso cometh unto me with a broken heart and a contrite spirit, him will I baptize with fire and with the Holy Ghost. And so here today, we understand this to be a very spiritual, broken heart, being very humble, having a lot of humility. However, right here, we've got a big sacrifice, but they're taking it very literally. So it's kind of one of those slight variations. And I was like, wow. So when I look at that, I see some really strong evidence that there were Israelite people in the Americas at one time way back in history. And so that's right here in the Book of Mormon. So there's further evidence when we look at the ancient pyramids. We see a lot of pyramids all throughout the Americas, and we even see mummies. Where did they get this? How are they getting all this Egyptian knowledge? Kind of where all of these similarities. We get this preponderance of evidence. And right there in the very beginning of the Book of Mormon, it says, I make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians. So we've got direct Egyptian influence right there in Nephi chapter 1. And we also have Hebrew influence right there in the Book of Mormon. So this is kind of furthering that pile of evidence. Could I have a time check?
Yeah, we're actually just a little over 10 minutes right now. I know
Oh,
we had
I'm sorry.
we had a little open discussion at the beginning, so that's fine. So if we want to do if we want to go stop screen sharing for now, and we're gonna
Yeah.
go head over to TJump there and let him have his 10 minutes there of rebuttal. But just want to let you know, everybody, I am your host tonight. My name's Ryan. Glad you're all here for my debut. This is the first time I'm doing this. Just want to do some housekeeping here. So I want to let you know that Modern Day Debate is a neutral debate platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. We hope you feel welcome, no matter what walk of life you're from. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We have many more debates coming up. We do have a Q&A at the end of the show where you can ask questions to our guests here, but just be sure that you're attacking the argument, not the person. With that, I'm going to kick it over to TJump, and 10 minutes for your opening statement. Floor is all yours.
Sure. So there are a number of contradictions, tons of factual errors, historical errors, literary errors, lots of errors in the Book of Mormon. It's essentially been disproven resoundingly in the history. So elephants in Ether 9:19. Elephants did not exist in America at the time of Ether. It didn't happen. Horses didn't exist in that area at the time period. They were in Canada and some other areas. Steel, there was no steel at that time period. Steel wasn't invented until later. Silk came to pass in the 8 later, not there. Wheat and barley, wrong time period. Sheep didn't exist until about later, when they were brought by the Europeans. Goats also introduced by the Europeans. Cattle and cow. There's no evidence that the Old World cattle, members of the genus Bos, inhabited the New World prior to European contact. Swine are also brought by Europeans. So there's lots and lots of errors, archaeological errors. We can also use Native American genetics to show that there's no Israeli lineage tied to them. We know where people are from because we can do DNA tests to show their lineage, and there is no Israeli DNA in Native American lineage. It would be pretty easy to prove, actually, so it's pretty obviously false. I didn't quite understand Kyle's opening. It seemed like he said they put blood on doors. This is similar to how it was done in the Old Testament, therefore there's a religious link. There's lots of similarities between things people do in crazy cultures. This doesn't mean that they originated from Israel. If that was the case, then the blood placed on the doors by the Japanese people would be evidence of Israelis in Japan. Clearly not the case. So obviously you can have similarities between different ideologies without them having originated in the same thing, as long as they originate in the human mind. There's lots of similarities in religions, they come from a sky daddy of some kind. That's not because they all originate in the same religion. That's because humans like to make up sky daddies. It's something that's very intuitionally convenient for us. So that's about all I got. Mormonism is false. Oh, by the way, I started a church, atheist church, the Church of the Best Possible Worlds. Please check out my GoFundMe on my Twitter. Go for it. It'll end there.
All right, excellent. So we can kick it over to open discussion here, or we can do a rebuttal period. It's up to you. If you had more screen sharing you wanted to do, Kyle, if you weren't done your presentation, that's fine as well. It's at your discretion if you guys would like to jump into an open discussion, or if you would like to have some more focus time to present your argument there.
I think I'm good. I'll let you know if something pops up that really needs screen. I think I got the bulk of my points done. That needed visuals anyway.
All right. Excellent. Then, so what we could do then is we can kick it into
open conversation.
Yeah, open conversation. Sorry. Thanks, TJump. All right. So, I'll let you guys have it. Thanks.
All right. You said the Japanese put blood on their doors? I've never heard of this before.
There's actually dozens of cultures that put blood on their doors. It's actually really common. It's not rare.
Many cultures that do that.
Yes.
I have to look into it. I've never heard of this Japanese culture. Was it specifically on the doorposts and
Yes.
lintel piece? Okay.
Well,
we do
both.
believe that the ancient Israelites were scattered and they weren't just here in the Americas, Jesus said, other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and there shall be one voice and one shepherd. And so we really believe they were scattered throughout the world. And that's why we see a lot of the same kind of architecture throughout the world. And so I don't know if you've ever compared Angkor Wat out in Indonesia and compared that with Chichen Itza and some of the other like Mexican pyramids. There's humongous similarities between the two. And so it really kind of shows to me that the ancients were far more advanced and civilized than a lot of the people in the world today really think they were back then.
Well, I agree they're pretty advanced for their time period. That's true, but the reason they're similar is because they're pyramids. Pyramids are a triangle. It's like a three-dimensional triangle. Of course, they're any pyramid made at any time is going to have similarities to other pyramids because it's a pyramid. And so like the materials that they use to make the pyramid are going to be stone because they can't make other things. So any pyramids made in that time period are going to be made of stone, and they're heavy, so they're going to have to be transported in a very similar way. So there's going to be lots of similarities if you build a similar structure with similar materials with the same technology. Yeah, there's going to be tons of similarities. It's not because they knew each other or had a connection. It's because they were building the same shape with the same tools and the same materials. And so they're pretty relatively intelligent humans. And so they're probably going to use the most efficient way to do that by moving them in a way that they can capably do and not be dumb about it, which was the same in both cultures. Because there's no the fact that these were built in the same way isn't evidence that they had some kind of connection socially. No.
Well, that's art history for you. This kind of recognizing iconography, really strong iconography, and kind of watching it, one nation influence another nation. And so one thing that we are able to really recognize here in the Americas is we just look at the White House and it's got the big, huge dome on the top. And that was one thing I specifically learned in my art history class, is learning about just that iconography and tying it all the way back to the Pantheon in Rome, and about how one started here and then kind of progressed over time.
Right, because it's literally based on that. But people built domes in different cultures, and they weren't all based on some super dome in the past. They just came up with domes on their own.
You're thinking people were building domes before looking at the Pantheon?
Yes, people built domes
kind of
all over the world. I mean, there was the first ones, and then other people built them too, not based off of the first one. With other technology, domes have been built in multiple ways in multiple cultures. They started like underground domes by building the framework and then covering it with mud prior to the Pantheon. The Romans built the first free hanging dome, which was pretty impressive for the time period, but domes have been built way before that. Igloos have been built as domes way before that.
Okay, I can take it with igloos, but igloos aren't really painted on the underside to look like the heavens. And so there's certain kind of iconography that kind of goes into it. And so it's kind of like having a very specific logo, and then all of a sudden seeing that logo in other parts of the world where it really shouldn't be. And so one of these kind of iconic markings, you can see the triptych doors, where you have the larger door in the center, and then you have two smaller doors to the left and right of it. And that's something we specifically see on Angkor Wat, and we also see it out in the Americas as well.
It's because it's really convenient to have exits on either side of the entrance. That's why those doors are there. This is not some kind of cultural zeitgeist that people are like, hey, we need a big door in the middle and two doors on the side because religion. It's because it's convenient. It's like the same reason that pyramids were built in the shape of a pyramid was because it works. It's convenient. And so the reason you have two exit doors on either side and one big entrance door in the middle is because it's more efficient to get people out that way. Movie theaters do this also. Does that mean that movie theaters are influenced by religion? No, it's just it works well.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about like Roman columns, and they've got the different kinds of Roman columns, and all of a sudden if you see those certain same columns in other places in the world, you're going to say, oh, that was just coincidence that it has
like the exact same columns. No, that would be very, very interesting, but they don't have the exact same columns anywhere else in the world.
I'm using an example. I'm using an example to say, hey, if you saw this Roman column with the kind of the scrolls on the top and the bottom, that's a pretty iconic image. Would you agree? And so if all of a sudden you were seeing those in Japan from like ancient times, you're like, Romans, Japan, what? And so it's going to raise some questions and kind of show some evidence of one culture influencing another culture. I'm not saying this actually happened with the Roman columns, but that does happen with other things, such as the triptych doors and also with the steepled arches. They've got certain arches in Egypt that have like stairway arches. That's the best way I could describe it. Kind of sawtooth kind of stairway arches. There's a whole bunch of them. And so this is kind of one example, but I think we're kind of diverting away from the point of the main thing, which is specifically marking the doors with blood. And you haven't really shown me all this other evidence of the Japanese and if they did it in the same manner or anything like that. Not that it would really knock anything, because yeah, it's one icon that's being shared among other places, and there can be variations to that.
Okay, so there are lots of myths people do specifically with blood, and there's no reason to think that these are connected big culture. There's no connection there. You've made no argument for that. Whatever you just said, oh look, these people put blood on the door. Oh, and these people also put blood on the door. You have made no argument that indicates that they're the same culture. You just said, oh look, two similarities. They also have
That's
eyes.
what we do. That's what we do.
No,
we
that's
look
not what
similarities.
historians do. That's not what historians have a very rigorous method for establishing if one culture was affected by another. Just seeing that they do things similar is not that method. That is not what we do. That's like if I said, oh look, you have a beard and I have a beard, therefore we're brothers. Like, no, that's not the correct method. See,
well, okay, I'm considering taxonomy, and the way taxonomy is done is by looking for similarities in animals. And so here is a very similar concept. It's like taxonomy, but with culture.
No. So similarities between animals are extremely specific. Like you can find exactly the particular bone and where it splits off from a double hinged jaw joint to know exactly where the evolutionary tree branches off. And so it's not just saying, oh, look, that has toes. That also has toes. They're the same. That's what you're doing, or the equivalent to what you're doing. The fact that people put blood on doors.
Common ancestor. And so we can say we do that with birds all the time, is count the number of toes on the bird and say, okay, yeah, this one's got like the cross bird, like the woodpecker, they've got the cross like 4 toes.
Yes,
on the
exact
woodpecker.
precise numbers, exact precise shape. Those are good analogies. Saying they put blood on doors is not analogous to that. That's like saying, oh, it has feet, and elephants have feet. They must be cousins.
Sorry to interrupt you guys here.
Uh-huh.
It does look like we moved a little bit away from the topic of is Mormonism true? So if we could move back into the debate topic there a little bit more succinctly there. I do also have another announcement here, or some more housekeeping, I should say. If you didn't know, all the debates on Modern Day Debate YouTube channel are uploaded to the podcast within 24 hours of them being live. So you can find Modern Day Debate on your favorite podcast right now, and you can hear all of these debates ad-free. So we could push the topic a little bit back into the topic of Mormonism, and it seems like that's what the live chat's kind of pushing here.
Okay.
So the argument is that simply saying that there is a similarity is not evidence that they are intrinsically linked. In order to show they're intrinsically linked, you would need something concrete like DNA. We know for a fact there is no common DNA between American Indians and Israelites. The genetic markers between those two groups are entirely separate. They have a common ancestor hundreds of thousands of years prior to that. There is no mingling between once you get Israeli ERVs to Native American ERVs. It doesn't happen. There's no such thing. So we can tell they are not the same.
Okay. So you seem to have this major impression in your mind that if the Book of Mormon were true, it would have to be perfect.
No.
At least that's kind of the impression that you gave me. You're saying, oh, well, there's all these inaccuracies in the Book of Mormon. And
Sure.
so because there's inaccuracies, it can't be true. That seemed to be your argument before.
No, like your claim specifically about Israelis being in South America, that to be true would have to show DNA proof, which it doesn't. So that part we know is false for that reason. The claims about Mormonism being like the word of God or whatever, if it is the word of God, you would expect it to be true mostly and not have blatant falsehoods. And it has blatant falsehoods, which would give us reason to believe it's human. It's evidence that it's man-made and not God-made.
The very, like in the introduction of the Book of Mormon, and at least in 2 other places in the Book of Mormon, it says that it has potential errors in it. It openly acknowledges that. It's saying, don't treat me like I'm perfect. Okay, it's got potential errors in it. It's written by man. It's translated by man. So yeah, we should expect that. We should expect there to be some kind of errors in it along the way. It makes room for that.
That doesn't lend evidence that it's the book of God. So like I could say, I have a book written by the all-powerful, all-knowing being of the universe. Oh, but it has some errors in it. That isn't evidence that it's actually the case that it's written by God. That's called a hedge. You hedge your bets.
No one claims it was written by God.
If it's like inspired by God or whatever, true facts.
Inspired by God, but written by man.
Right.
It's,
What's the difference between
Mormon was not God.
What's the difference between a book that inspired by God, written by man with tons of mistakes, and a book made up by man with equally as many mistakes? What's the difference? How do you tell the difference?
You said that really fast. I'm sorry.
How do you tell the difference between a book that was completely made up by a guy who claimed it was inspired by God and just has a whole bunch of mistakes because he didn't know anything, so he got a bunch of errors, and a book that was actually inspired by God but written down by a guy who didn't know anything and got made a bunch of errors?
All right. A bad guy wouldn't write something like this, and a good guy who is just making it up, a good guy wouldn't write something like this if he's just totally ad-libbing and just making things up. If he's just writing a novel, a good guy wouldn't do that.
Okay, I'm not.
And a bad guy isn't going to write something that's that great.
I'm not following this good guy, bad guy dichotomy. There's no evidence that good people and bad people have a proclivity to write certain words as opposed to others. There's no scientific evidence of that. People make stuff up all the time. Good people write bad stories. Bad people write good stories. There's no good, bad people will do this argument. That doesn't make any sense. Yes, people can make stuff up. I mean, Jonathan Smith was a terrible person. He was a liar, a fraud, convicted many times over. So he was a bad person.
Smith? I don't know who Jonathan Smith is.
The guy who wrote the Book of Mormon, whatever his name was.
No. There's Joseph Smith.
Yeah, that's
definitely different.
That's
okay.
him. So
yeah, he
convicted
translated
fraud,
the Book of Mormon.
Convicted fraud. We know he's a bad person, but I wouldn't bring in his character. I don't care about his character. His character doesn't matter. You're trying to make some kind of argument that his character would make it impossible for him to write this book. Like, no. In fact, most people who make religious books are bad people. So it would actually make more sense that bad people would exactly write this.
Okay. Well, so the whole thing here is it's not written as a perfect book. And so you were talking before, what's the difference between someone just making it up, not being inspired by God, and someone who is writing it being inspired by God? That was your question, right?
How do you tell the difference? Like, what is the evidential difference between the two?
Well, there's the Book of Mormon promise, which is what really makes it stand out. And that is God testifies on his own behalf. He's able to speak for himself. We believe in a living God, not just a dead God. We believe God still speaks today. And so when I have an experience with God and I write that down in my own imperfect language, that's just as valid as the Book of Mormon is, for me anyway.
Okay, but the question is how do you tell the difference between it being made up and it being true? So people can have delusions and they write down those delusions, which are not true. And then people supposedly have a vision of God and write down those delusions, and those are supposedly true. How do you tell the difference between the true visions and the delusions?
Well, we study it out for ourselves. This is kind of a huge part of it. And so Alma talks about treating the word like a seed that we plant in the ground and grow. And so this kind of gets into this analogy of where it takes some study, it takes some thought, it takes some investigation.
Well, I'm asking specifically for your methodology. So I understand that you presumably have some methodology. So I'm asking you, how do you differentiate testimony of God versus testimony of delusions? So I'm specific question about methodology. How do you do it?
All right. So the very first start is just through prayer. You can ask God if he's there, and God answers his prayers. He's willing to testify and
Okay.
do miracles in people's lives. And
God,
so that's kind of
are you there? Can I get a gold brick, please?
okay. So there's more to it than just that, because, and you have to understand kind of the expectations that go into it. And so,
Okay, tell
God doesn't-
me what magical word prayer I have to say to get my answer.
well, there has to be that contrite heart. Okay, you have to have that contrite heart, being willing to change, because
I'm totally open to change. I follow the evidence wherever it leads. Tell me what magical words I need to say for God to answer, because I've been trying for years now, or for many years, never got anything. So what is the magical word combination I need here?
Okay, he's the one who judges your heart, not me. And what I do is I help people build that relationship. And so one of those ways that you can really show that you are sincere and are willing to change can be through fasting. That's one great way to show, hey, I'm sincere about this. Going to church, there's certain commitments that you have to show him. Look at me, I'm being committed. And so it's kind of, I'm going back to the seed here. You don't just plant it in the ground. Okay, I'm expecting fruit now. It takes time for that tree to grow and develop and produce fruit. And once you have that fruit, wow, there it is. And that's how you know.
So how do we verify the fruit is there and not a figment of your imagination? That's the question.
Well, like I said, it's like planting a seed. And so
what is the success rate? So like, let's say we take a group of 1,000 people, we all pray, we all fast. How many of them are going to get the word from God?
I don't know the answer to that, because different people have different circumstances.
Is it more or less than the amount of random chance? That's what I'm interested in.
I think that's kind of amount of random chance.
Yeah.
So
like
just
a placebo, placebo double-blind trials where we give half people a placebo, it does nothing, and half the people a drug. If the drug has the exact same positive effect as the placebo, the drug does nothing. So you have a control group, which is random chance. How many will see visions of God via random chance? And then you have some methodology, and that methodology has to increase the number of people who hear from God. Otherwise, it's no different from random chance, in which case it does nothing.
So you're talking about like a specific study, get a whole bunch of people in a room.
Any method. So any methodology that you propose that can get us in communion with God, if it works at the exact same rate as random chance, that means it doesn't work. It does nothing. So you need to give me a method that I can do that'll have a higher rate than random chance to get into communion with God. And we got plenty of atheists here willing to try it.
Willing to get in there and do that. So like I said, there's kind of that level of commitment, and you could do that. I don't know any kind of statistics for you on the matter. I can just kind of point to my ancestors and the miracles that they've seen in their lives, and I can read from you from their journals if you wanted me to. And they've seen some really amazing things that happened.
Again, my question is addressing all of those. It's how do you tell the difference between that really happening and being a delusion? That's the method I need before we can go through, is this testimony reliable? We need to know, how do you tell the difference between imagination and reality? My method is novel testable predictions. Works extremely well. It's what science uses. It's the only reliable way that we have that can differentiate imagination from reality. If you can make a prediction about the future that we don't know anything about yet and get it right consistently, that is phenomenal evidence. Simply saying you have personal testimony does not do that, because everyone does. Everyone claims to have personal testimony. Every religion, every delusion, every ghost story claims to have personal experience. That is a terrible source of evidence. This is why we don't use it in the court of law. We don't use it in history. We don't use it in science.
Okay. And so this is kind of going down to your whole definition of proof, which you don't really believe in, because we could be a brain in a vat. And if we are all brains in a vat, then everything we see is a delusion.
I didn't say anything about proof. I said evidence. Evidence, anything that increases the probability of a proposition being true. So I don't need proof. I need evidence.
Okay. Well, you wanted something that is, you wanted to know for certain that it's not a delusion.
No. Right? I want evidence. I don't need certainty. I need evidence. So evidence that something is not a delusion is novel testable predictions. It's not proof, but it is evidence.
Okay, so novel testable predictions. And so how would
Yes.
you go about in doing that in taxonomy when it comes to classifying animals?
Well,
Can you
evolution
really
does it all the time. Like evolution has no problem doing this. They say we predict that we're going to find, if evolution is true, we predict we'll find a fossil that is a halfway between a lizard and a fish, and we'll find it exactly this geological timescale, nowhere before it, nowhere after it, and we'll be able to. And then they say, okay, we've never seen this before. Now we predict it's going to be here. Then we go look, we go dig, and we think, hey, we found it. So that's a novel testable prediction, which was confirmed for Tiktaalik, one of hundreds of thousands that have been done in taxonomy related to evolution. Others would be ERVs. If you predict that two species like elephants and hippos are related, you would expect to see ERV markers that are similar in such a case that they branched off at certain points in the DNA at similar timescales. And we test the DNA, we find, oh, look, they do. That's confirmation, novel testable prediction that the two are related.
Okay, so I've kind of talked about the evolution of religions over time, and that's why I shared with Earth on the Turtle's Back and the Aztec pyramids, and saying these two things evolved from one common ancestor with the ancient Hebrew religion, and that was my whole statement. And so I've got the Book of Mormon, and I've got the Bible, and I've got these other things which are kind of showing that there's some similarities, such as kind of pointing out number of toes on a bird. And so we're kind of looking here for further ancient things that would kind of connect it, as you're talking about kind of those predictions. And so Joseph Smith, to my knowledge, had no idea about these Aztec codexes. No idea.
Okay.
That was something that was out of his mind. So all of a sudden these codexes pop up and, oh, wow, look at that. I'm going to say that's evidence. It's improving the possibility that Joseph Smith was right.
Wait, what did he predict?
So
What was the novel prediction that he made?
the novel prediction he made was that there was Hebrew influence here in the Americas. That was his whole thing. He did, like, 14-year-old boy doesn't just, oh yeah, that's totally the thing.
So if I predict there's Hebrew influence in Japan and I see a similarity between the Japanese and the Hebrews, does that mean I'm right? That
If you
there's-
find similarities, then that's going to increase the possibility that you are being right. I agree.
So in order for it to be evidence, it has to be specific. You can't just be vague and ambiguous. It's called an ambiguity fallacy. In science, you're not allowed to say, there will be some similarities between this culture and this culture. That is not evidence of anything. If you want evidence, what you need is something specific, which is why I said you will find a transitional fossil between a lizard and a fish at exactly this geological scale and never above, never below. It's extremely precise. Saying culture A will impact culture B in some unknown way, and then you look at all of the tens of thousands of things relevant to culture A and try to find one or two similarities between culture B, that is called an ambiguity fallacy. Any of the tens of thousands of factors relevant to culture A may or may not be similar with every culture in the world. You can pick a random culture, Eskimos, and find similarities between their culture and Israel culture. Does that mean they originated the same? No, it means that people adopted random cultural things, and some of them are going to be the same across cultures. There are lots of flood stories. Does that mean they all came from one flood? No, because floods happen all over the world. And so because floods happen all over the world and impact people in a very profound way, they will all come up with stories related to floods. It does not mean because that they are similar that they must have originated in the same story, one flood. Like, no, that's not how it works. Because people have brains and people work in similar ways, their cultures are going to have similarities due to random chance. So again, in order to have evidence of your claim, you need something that works at a higher rate than random chance. And simply saying that culture A will have some impact on culture B will not be higher than random chance, because you can find any culture some similarity to any other culture.
Okay, so before you ever made the claim that there's going to be some Hebrew evidences in Japan, you were not aware of any of these kind of things. You weren't aware of any kind of similar iconography. And so I think one of those really unique icons in, I guess I'm thinking of China here. China's got the big lion heads. I guess Japan has some of those too. But the dragon, lion, like
Yeah.
guard dogs that they put on their
Yes.
temples.
Yes.
I'm just pointing out like a major icon.
Yes.
And so, yeah, if you were to see some of those suddenly pop up in Israel, that's
There
going to
are-
show you
There
a
are
connection.
tons of those all over the world.
Tons of these kind of lion heads with
Dog lion statues are very common.
very common. And
Yep.
you're thinking those just happened by chance?
Yes, because dogs and cats are very common, and so people make statues of dogs and cats. It's not because there's some common culture. It's because, hey, oh look, a dog. Those are pretty cool. I'm going to make a statue of it. Egyptians had tons of statues of dogs and cats. Not because they were influenced by Japan, and Japan wasn't influenced in their dogs and dragons by Egypt. It's because there are dogs and cats at each of those locations. And so they made statues independently of dogs in those locations.
Okay. I'm kind of thinking of coloring contest right now, where you walk into a coloring contest and you see a ton of different pictures that are all just colored different ways. It's all the same underdrawing, the same black and white drawing that they were going from, but they're just colored different ways. And so I'm going to say, oh wow, they're all kind of based on the common underdrawing. But you're just saying, oh yeah, they're all just kind of drawing that underdrawing on their own, and they just happen to look the same. And it can be very, very specific in times.
Well, no, that's the part you're missing. None of what you said is specific. Blood on doors is not specific. Blood on doors is like sculpture of a dog. They don't have the same architecture. They don't have the same historical connotations. It's not like the Japanese dogs have a very specific history to them, which are completely different from the dogs in Egypt. They both have statues of dogs because dogs are really common, but they aren't the exact same statue, which is how historians can tell that they are not in any way related to one another. People just happen to see a dog and be like, hey, that would make a cool statue. And so when you're trying to make a connection between cultures, you can't use something extremely vague like, oh, there's blood on the door, or oh, look, a statue of a dog.
I
You
think
need
that's
to
a
predict
personal bias.
specifically. No, this is science. The science has a method specifically to be able
No,
to
you're
determine.
just saying that it's not specific, and I think it's super specific,
What?
especially with the whole heart thing and being a sacrifice.
Yeah, human sacrifice was common, just like dogs are common.
It's very specific, a sacrifice of the heart, just like the Book of Mormon describes.
Sacrificing the heart was extremely common all over the world.
All over the world.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with. You're just saying all over the world doesn't quite substantiate your claim.
Google heart sacrifices.
That they
Human
mark the blood
sacrifice.
on doors.
Yes, Google blood on doors. Like, this is cultural things humans do all the time. Like, I don't understand the problem here. Yes, people will kill people and then they'll put their blood on doors or pillars to scare away other people and to be intimidating. It was very common. Romans did it.
Blood on
Greeks did it.
doors.
Spartans
All I
did
get
it.
is Egypt and Passover. I don't know. Maybe you're going off of a different Google than I am, but yeah, that's my thing.
Probably because your
10 plagues of
search,
Egypt.
your search engine may be a little biased.
Okay, so your claim is
I'm claiming that you
Yes.
probably search things mostly related to Christianity, and so it's probably coming
okay.
up.
So your claim is unsubstantiated. Then you just said Google it, and I Googled it, and that's all I got was Hebrew.
So I mean, I don't need to substantiate this at all. It's super common knowledge. You can call a
That's
historian
the
and ask
burden
them.
of proof.
No, it's just like saying the sky is blue. If you don't trust me that the sky is blue, you can go talk to an expert on that one. This is very common in human culture. Go bother a historian on that one.
Okay, so okay, you're just saying it's specific. I called you out on it
It's
being
not
very specific.
It's not specific.
Blood on doors is very specific.
No.
It's not like on the door itself. It like the wood in between. It's on the door
That's not
posts. And the
specific.
lintel
If you
piece
think it
across.
is, you don't know what specificity is. You don't know history, but you can take that up with historians. Like, if you
Well,
think that's
you
great
can-
evidence, then you're done. Like, I don't really care. Like, it's not. I've proven it's not. You can take it up with historians if you want lots of examples. There's plenty of them.
Okay, and yeah, it's just coming down to
there's
that. Right
Vikings
there.
that did it. Eskimos did
Vikings
it.
have done that. I've
Yeah.
never heard of Eskimos doing that or Vikings doing that. I think you're
Okay,
just
do
making
more
stuff
research.
up again.
You can do more
Yeah,
research. Like, it's common knowledge.
It's on you. It's your claim.
Nope, you're done.
The
You're
burden
done.
of proof
you
is on
don't,
you.
need to give common knowledge things that happen all over the world and be like, it's the same. Like your argument is just dumb. Saying that, oh, look, there's blood on doors in this culture and there's blood on doors in this culture does not mean they're the same. Have you never heard of correlation does not imply causation? This is very basic.
I've definitely heard of that. I've definitely heard
your
of that.
argument is a fallacy of correlation. You've made no evidential argument to support that the fact that a culture has one similarity implies that they originate with the same thing. I debunked this argument in its entirety when I told you that every culture throughout humanity is going to have some arbitrary similarities to other cultures. You would need to show that the number of similarities between whatever the Aztecs and the Israels was higher than the rate of chance. Until you can demonstrate that, pointing out, cherry picking a few particular things which might be similar is not evidence they are the same. Furthermore, I proved they are not influenced because genetically we can show they have the different ERVs. We know for a fact there was no influence between these two things. So I gave 3 points that
I didn't make any argument about genetics here.
No,
I did not make any argument. I know you did. And so that doesn't have anything to do with my argument. I just said that they were taught by the same people.
Which means the people had to be there, right?
At one time, but they could have left afterwards. And so
Okay.
I can go and teach someone down the street and they can remember the things that I taught them, and then I can leave and I don't have to be there anymore.
Okay, and that didn't happen. We know historically that didn't happen. It's been proven that didn't happen.
There's evidence. And so we see the signature. And so it's
No.
like I can
Again, that's not evidence because you're cherry picking a few things which are the same between several cultures, which you can cherry pick from any culture in the world, which means what you really need to do is show that there are more similarities than random chance. So for your argument to actually be a good argument, what you'd have to do is go between all the different cultures and see if you can find similarities between those cultures and Israel, and see if there's more similarities between the Aztec people and Israel. And again, you also have to use the historical method that they used to already disprove this to change their position. If you can change the historical position and show that the historians are all wrong, that would be phenomenal evidence. You're not going to be able to do that, but that would be the first step in trying to make your argument make sense.
The first step is by pointing out what random looks like. And so I just take every culture in the world and send it through a blender and say, that's random. And because this does not look like that, therefore it's right.
No, you'd say if your argument is correct, then there would be more similarities between the Aztecs and the Israel than there are between the Israelis and the Eskimos, or the Israelis and the Japanese, or the Israelis and the Australians. If the number of similarities is approximately the same, then there's no evidence that the Israelis had any impact on the Aztecs whatsoever. It just happens to be that randomly some aspects of their culture happen to be the same as some aspects of a different culture. So your claim, in order to be verified, you can't cherry pick a few similarities, because I can cherry pick similarities of a different culture. You need to show that the number of similarities is greater than that of random chance, or what happens by random chance between cultures that are not related. Does that make sense?
Well, you're just going to say cherry picking no matter how many things I pull out, I'm pretty sure.
No, you'd have to show like what is the number of similarities between all the cultures on average. You would have to do the work to actually show what that is. I don't know what that is.
Have you ever done that with anyone? Like if you were to just look at, okay, if we were to just
I do this with science all the time. Like this is the scientific method. If you make a claim, you happen to have a null set, the I forget what it's called now, p-values, and of the p-values, you have a base, the placebo, and then you compare that to your expected result to see if it's more or less than the p-values. And so you claim is that Israelis influenced the Aztecs. So for a p-value, what you would need, a neutral value that would falsify your claim, is if the number of similarities between Israel and the Aztecs was exactly or approximately the same as the number of similarities between Israelis and a culture they didn't influence. And then if it had more, a lot more, that would be good evidence that it is not just a coincidence. So you, to make this argument not be fallacious, would need to come up with a value of the approximate random similarities between cultures that happen without any association, and then show that the similarities between the Aztecs and the Israels is more than that. Simply picking a few similarities doesn't give us anything.
It's the signature on a drawing. Basically,
No.
I look at the drawings. I can look at a series of drawings and see very different drawings. But when I look and find that signature to see who drew it, that tells me who drew the picture. That's the basics.
No, because there are different signatures. Many paintings have different signatures. So the fact that they have a signature doesn't mean they came from the same individual. So what you would again need to do to show that it is the same signature, you need a baseline number. What is the amount of similarities that happen by random chance between societies that have no influence? You need to get that number first. And
okay, you're setting an impossible standard.
That's
here, 'cause
not
I don't
an
think anyone
impossible
has
standard.
no one has ever gone and list and numbered every attribute of an entire society before.
You don't need to
people
list
done that with the
every
United
attribute.
States?
That's not.
That's
the thing.
you're talking
I'm
about putting
I'm
numbers to
literally
things.
telling you basic historical method of how to associate different cultures. This is literally what historians do. Yes, they take the aspects of the culture. They take the aspects of the culture and compare it to a different culture and see if it's just happens to be the same that's randomly happens between societies, or if there is an overrepresented proclivity of similarities between the culture, and you can tell which cultures influence other cultures. I'm literally just telling you the basic science of how history works here. You take a baseline. A baseline is what you would expect if there was no correlation. You need that number. This is a p-value. It's basic p-value science. And once you get that number, you compare it to how many similarities are in your two hypothesis cultures to see if it's more or the same to that number. This is not hard. I'm not making any unreasonable request here. It's basic science.
You're trying to create this number that no one has ever numbered before.
No, I literally just told you, yes, they have. This is how historians do it. This is how they know
numbering
if
all the
one
different
culture affects
attributes.
another culture.
I can list a lot of other attributes too. This is just
I don't care. I need to know the number of what is the number of similarities between cultures at random. I need to know that number first. It doesn't matter how many.
Who has ever done that ever?
I literally already answered that. Listen next time. So what you need is a baseline value. You listing similarities is irrelevant. I can list tens of thousands of similarities between me and apes. That doesn't mean that my mother was an ape or a monkey. The fact that you can list a bunch of similarities tells us nothing unless we can contrast it to the number you would expect to happen by random chance. Until you can say that, you have nothing. You have zero.
All right. You're the one who believes in the whole evolution thing and commonalities indicate a common ancestor. That's your whole thing.
I was literally saying I have 98% of my DNA and chimps are the same, so I can list literally hundreds of thousands of genetic similarities between me and an ape. Does that mean that my ape was literally, or my mom was literally a chimpanzee? No.
You don't claim that. That's you're kind of strawmanning yourself there.
Oh my God. So the argument here is that the number of things you can list, does that tell me whether one was influenced by the other? So I can list tens of thousands of similarities between me and a chimpanzee. Does that prove my mom was a chimpanzee?
You're strawmanning yourself.
No. Oh my God. I don't even know how to. So what you need in order to prove a claim is to say, what is the amount we would expect by random chance? What is the amount of similarities we would expect by random chance between me and an ape? Well, because we come from a common ancestor, there's going to be about 98% of the genome that's going to be the same. So that doesn't actually tell me whether or not an ape was, or a chimpanzee was my mom, because it's what we expect. If it's not my mom, it's what we expect. So in order to know if a chimpanzee was my mom, you would expect it to be higher than that number. You expect it to be like 99.9999999% of DNA would be the same. Then you could conclude, yes, my mother was a chimpanzee. But so the point here is I can list 98% of similarities, but that does not show a chimpanzee as my mother, because it is the equivalent of what we'd expect if it was not my mother. So the point is that you need a baseline number first, and then show your similarities go above that baseline, not just list a bunch of similarities. That's irrelevant. It's gibberish, not science, not evidence.
Okay. Well, I've never seen anyone do science the way you're describing by.
Then you've never seen anyone do science.
I've never seen anyone do science.
Literally every scientific paper, get a p-value. Every one of them. Every single paper.
All right, you're just making stuff up now.
No.
Okay,
oh
substantiate your claims.
You're done.
Substantiate your
Google
claims, dude.
p-values. Like, you need a baseline. I literally, have you never heard of a placebo?
I've
pull
heard of
your head
placebos.
out
Yes.
of your butt.
Okay,
Why
but not
do
all
they use
science is the
placebos?
same.
Why do they use
Not all
placebos?
science
Every
is the same.
scientist who does any trials uses placebos. Why do they do this? Why are placebos required in every single medical test? No exceptions. Why are they required?
Not every
Every single
test.
medical test requires, by definition, placebos by the FDA.
That's
It's
great for
required.
medicine. Okay, it's a little
Why
different in
are
art
they
history.
required?
We don't use placebos in
You
art
use the
history.
exact same thing in history. You use a baseline
You're making
p-value,
stuff up.
contrast that to the data every time. Your ignorance of basic science, and then
All right, now you're
saying
just
that-
insulting
that-
me.
Yes, because you're dumb.
And
I'm
that's
giving
an
you the
insult.
basic science to
Yeah.
tell you how to provide evidence. You can't do it. You're giving a bunch of random things which you think are evidence, given no way to show that it's not just an effect of random chance. Yours isn't evidence. I've explained
Okay.
this to you. You're done.
I can come up with more, and
I
you're just
don't
dismissing
care.
it. You're getting mad. You're just getting mad.
Because I've
Okay?
crushed
You want to
you.
blow up? That's on you. Okay.
You're
If you want
done.
to lose your cool? That's
You're
If you want
done.
to lose your cool? That's on you.
You're done.
We can move
because
into
you don't want to
the
hear anymore. I got it.
we can move into the Q&A now, guys, if you'd
Yep,
like.
that sounds good.
All right, excellent. And just before we go into Q&A, just a reminder that our guests are linked in the description. If you want to hear more, and that includes the podcast or the episode for this debate, we link all our guests in the description and each podcast episode as well. All right, so we'll get into the super chats that we had here. So our super chat starts out with Big Bad Mama for $2. Says, Kyle, Book of Abraham hoax? ? Do you understand what they're trying to imply with that? Or
They're not being
implying that-
very specific. A lot of people who don't believe, that's all you can say is Book of Abraham hoax. You could say the same thing for people who don't believe in the Book of Mormon. Book of Mormon hoax. That's just what people say. I say NASA's a hoax, so that's whatever.
Okay, if we got that right there, Big Bad Mama, you can let us know in the live chat there. If you want to clarify a little bit, just pop us a message in the live chat. All right, so Coffee Mom, $4.99. Kyle, what is the current apologetic for the Book of Mormon claim that God turned certain people's skin black because they disobeyed him? Basic science says that is a lie.
Basic science says that's a lie. Well, people end up changing over time. And does God end up distinguishing people? Why not? So you can just say basic science says it's a lie, but yeah, when do you go out there and describe what God does at all? Like, when do you go do that and say, okay, this is a lie, that's not? Okay, when you can show some basic science that says what God does and doesn't do, then we can talk.
All right, gotcha. All right, and moving ahead, and we have Bob for $2.22 asking, what is Reformed Egyptian?
Reformed Egyptian is Egyptian that was made so you can write it easier. And so it's not like straight up Egyptian. So in English, they have shorthand, writing in shorthand versus longhand. I don't know how to write in shorthand. It's something more reporters did back in the day. So that's my understanding of it, is Reformed Egyptian is like a shorthand Egyptian.
All right, excellent. All right, just bear with me for one moment here. Right, and Sharik has a commentary for $1.99. Trump's heavenly clam chair makes God blush.
True facts.
All right, Sharik likes the chair. All right. Yeah, for $9.99, 2 times over, Sean Erickson asked, well, he didn't ask a question. He has more of a commentary here saying, Kyle, I was raised in Mormonism growing up in Utah, and I came out of it a long ago. You know just as well as I do, it is demonstrably false. I truly hope you find a way out, my friend. Good luck.
Wow, he seems to be really omniscient there. He's like, oh, I know what you know. And so it doesn't work that way. I think he's
Irony? Irony alert? Irony meter. Irony
well, I don't
meter.
claim to be omniscient. I don't claim to know what you know. So that's one of those boundaries I prefer not to cross.
All right, gotcha. All right, so we'll keep going here. Another one from Bob here for $2.22. We have, how according to the witnesses did Joseph Smith translate the Book of Mormon?
How did he translate it?
Yeah, so they're asking how, according to the witnesses, how did he translate the book?
through inspiration and the power of God.
Okay, got you there. And Mark Reed for $5 asks, Kyle, Romans used to put hyena blood on doors to protect from witchcraft. TJump is correct on this point. Thresholds were important, so was blood. All right, you guys.
Hyena blood. Okay, that's not really straight from the heart or a sacrifice.
Any comments there, TJump, on that one? That's kind of directed to the two of you there. It says you're correct, so. I mean-
Yeah. So it's just there are similarities between cultures and things that people value. Blood is one of them. Hearts is another one. And so the fact that people use those in rituals to do magic is extremely common. And Kyle wanting specific examples of this is just kind of silly. Like, yeah, there's tons of them.
Okay.
I don't know how is it being put on the mantle, the top, on the bias? It's just being tossed on the door. Like, it's really, really not specific at this point. If we could expound on that. And also, Rome was not that far away from Israel. So should there be some kind of a cultural influence
To protect from
absolutely.
witches?
What do you think happened in the Passover? We were kind of
To protect from
we put
witches?
we put the blood on the door to protect from the destroying angel. So you could take that as an evil spirit or something like that. The Israelites, they did this and that protected them, so we're going to adopt that. And that's kind of the way cultures are influenced by each other. And so we just look at the Greeks and the Romans and about how they very similar
Correlation is not
very
causation. Similarities are
religions.
common. You need a base value of how many similarities happen by random chance before you can
You
think
don't
that it's-
believe the Romans believed in the same kind of gods as the Greeks. They just changed the names to a lot of them and
what
altered a few of the stories.
those were different gods than the Hebrews.
Oh, yeah, I agree. But this is kind of about
But the question
one
is
culture
can
influencing
people
another.
can people do things that are similar by random chance? Does that happen?
By random chance.
Yes. Do people randomly do certain cultural things that happen to be really similar because
Putting
of
one
random
block
chance?
on top of another, I could say that people could randomly do that. Okay,
Right. So
building
the
block
question
towers.
is how do you tell the difference between similarities that happen by random chance and those that are more than random chance? The question
Well-
you need to answer is well, how often do they happen at random chance? And how often would be more than random chance, right?
So we can look at the Greeks and the Romans, right? You're the one talking about this big p-value with the Greeks and the Romans.
What?
Where do you see that p-value anywhere? Or is it just saying, oh, yeah, we see similarities. I'm going to call you out on this one, saying that you're just,
We know specifically that
Exactly.
the Roman gods are translated to the Greek gods and they have different names for the same thing. We know those are culturally translated from one to another because of the amount of similarities is higher than that of the rate of chance. There are
and
lots of
one was
similarities.
okay, so you're okay. I'm trying to hold you to your same standard that you're trying to
Yes.
hold me to.
Sure.
And so you're saying that we've got all these things and we can't just say it all happened by correlation does not equal causation. We have to have the p-value. We have to have all these numbers in there.
Yep.
But I don't see any numbers. Have you ever heard of any numbers?
Yes.
And
That's
every
literally
history
what they
textbook I've
do in
ever-
history. Yes.
in
Literally that's what
every
they do.
history textbook I've ever read, I've never heard them list out the numbers when it comes to the similarities.
Maybe you
And
should
so if
read
you want to
better
claim that
books.
if you want to claim that's the case, substantiate your claim.
Well, again, they all do this. This is literally a thing.
All
What
do
is the
this.
amount
Yeah.
of similarities that happen by random chance? Is this more or less? That's the premise of every paper when they're claiming similarities. is
All right. Well,
how
let's see
often does
this
it
with the
happen by
Greeks and the
random
Romans.
chance? Is this more than random chance? That's the question. That's how you
And
know.
we can look at the Mayans and the Aztecs, the Greeks and the Romans. There's a lot of different neighboring civilizations that have influenced each other. We could look at
Yes.
Japan and China.
And they
Japan and
happen
China-
at a higher rate than civilizations that are unrelated, right? If civilizations are unrelated, they will have some similarities, but that number will be lower than civilizations that influence each other, right? They're going to have more similarities, right?
Yeah. And so
Why is
that's
that
what I'm
hard?
talking about. But I've never seen anyone number it. You're saying that it's all about the numbers. And so
Yes,
China
it
and
is.
Japan, somewhere out there would have had to number it, but you
Yes,
have
they do.
no.
They do. They literally do in all of
Let's
the
see it.
papers.
Let's see
Read the
it.
papers on history on how they make
That's three
similarities.
papers, but I am not going to point you to any specific papers
Because
because
they all have it. Pick one.
it's BS. Okay, you're just making stuff up.
Just like last time, you were wrong
Substantiate
when
your
I was
claim.
making stuff about the blood on the door. You're wrong this time as well. You're just trying to insulate yourself from
I,
your false
I still
beliefs.
haven't seen any. I still haven't seen anything to substantiate your claim.
Again, you're just trying to insulate yourself from common knowledge facts of history. Please get educated on basic academia. Like, just Google
Now
some
you're just
history
throwing
papers.
insults because you're mad.
No, I've destroyed you. Like, you just don't
No,
know
you
history.
didn't. You're just
Completely
making up
destroyed
stuff.
you.
You never
Alright,
did.
let's,
You can't
let's
destroy me
basic
without substantiating your
p-values.
claims.
Yes, p-values,
let's-
common term used in all papers. Oh, but you haven't given a specific paper. It's p-values
All
because it's in all of
papers,
them.
really?
Yes,
I've never seen that
yes.
in.
P-values. They're
well,
pretty
the
important. You
last-
may want to Google basic scientific facts before you
Yeah.
talk about things, because it's pretty important. Talk
The
to a
last
historian.
scientific paper I read was from Jacqueline McLaughlin, or McLaughlin, as some people like to say, and which is saying science never proves anything, but I don't see any kind of p-value in that paper. So you're saying it's in all papers, therefore it should be in that paper, but it's not in that paper, so therefore you're wrong.
She probably doesn't know how to write a paper then, but I
This
agree.
is
Science
Dr.
doesn't prove
Jacqueline
anything.
McLaughlin in the college in the Journal of College Science Teaching. So she's a teacher of the teachers, and I can
No,
pull it
she's
up
not.
for you right now, and I can screen share it with you and
That's great.
totally demolish you on that. So
No, but it does
because
have a
you're making
p-value.
you're making this all-encompassing claim. It's in all papers. That's your all-encompassing claim, but it's not the case.
Okay, but your dumbass paper has nothing to do with reality. It's not a claim about
Oh,
reality.
Well, I'm glad you disagree with Jacqueline McLaughlin, because
No.
I wholeheartedly disagree with
Philosophical
her.
conclusions have nothing to do with, does one culture or one fact in reality relate to another fact in reality. Saying science doesn't prove stuff is not a derivative equation between two facts. What you're saying is just, again, your ignorance of science, to make a relevant analogy here. If you're trying to compare two species or two cultures and want to know if they relate in some way, you're going to need a base value of how much they're going to rate by chance and the number of relations to know if it's more than that. This is very basic science. The fact that you're so ignorant of basic science is just astounding. I've debunked you.
You're just
Move
you're
on.
just throwing more
I've
insults.
just debunked
You're
you.
just
Move
throwing
on.
more insults. Okay, I can be
'Cause
more
I've debunked
respectful
you.
than that.
Move on.
Okay.
All right, let's
Okay.
move on to the next question there,
The
fellas.
person doing the debunking doesn't get all insulty. They don't. There's no need for that. If you're winning, there's no.
That's a
need to throw insults.
fallacy, moron. You can insult someone and win at the same time, as I'm doing now. Moron.
Yeah,
All right,
there's
let's
no need
move
for
on
that.
to our
Kyle,
next question.
Super
there,
chat from
fellas.
Turing Test 2. Kyle has inoculated himself against education. Agreed.
All right, so for 222, Bob has sent in another question here. The question is, why was Joe Smith in jail before his assassination? I think that's for you there as well, Kyle.
Why was he in
fraud.
jail? Because of his assassination? Well, people didn't like him, and so he got thrown in jail multiple times throughout his life. And so, yeah, people would accuse him of different things all throughout his life. And yeah, the question is, yeah, if he was there, like, why did they give him a gun? That was like a big thing. There's a lot of things that kind of went into there. He was there peacefully. He was there peacefully. He was being held there against his will. If he wanted to go out and fight the jailman, he could have done so, but he didn't.
All right, got you there. All right, so Elusive Viper sends in $10 and says, how does Kyle address the idea that social traditions can arise from biological evolutionary means? Blood is objectively important for life. It's not impressive for multiple societies to value it. So just to clarify at the start of that question, how does Kyle address the idea that social traditions can arise from biological evolutionary means?
Well, social, like language itself, if we get into etymology, a lot of these languages kind of come from very common things. They all kind of come from root cultures. I hope we can agree on at least on that part. And so it happens the same way with language. Language itself kind of shows common ancestors of man. And that's basic etymology. And so it goes farther than just language. It also comes out in cultures. And so a lot of people view blood as life because they come from the same kind of cultural background or originating in the same places their languages came from.
Or they die when they bleed, and so they think blood is important because if they lose it, they die. Could be.
You could also associate blood with death in that way.
Yes, that's probably why it has been seen as important throughout all cultures, even though they have no relation to one another, because they die if they lose the blood.
or they die if they see the blood. So it can equally be put on with death. In fact, with it actually gets seen as death a lot of times because a lot of people say, oh, their divinity don't bleed. And so that it actually becomes a mark of mortality. Having blood is what makes you mortal.
All right, gotcha. I got Ozian Talks, $5. I believe God does not exist and that I'm rational for my belief. Not sure about Mormonism with infinite gods and humans, with one causing the other. That's
With-
the
Okay, so can you say that again?
yeah, I'll read it in its entirety. I believe God does not exist and that I'm rational for my belief. So the bulk of, I think, the commentary is not sure about Mormonism with infinite gods and humans, with one causing the other.
With one human causing another human to come to pass.
Oh, I think it means
I guess there's a lot of
because in Mormonism you can become a god, and the
no.
god,
It's we are gods. We are children of God, and so that's kind of when Jesus said, "Ye are gods." That's written in the book of Psalms. Yeah, so it's not just having one God, but we are all the children of God.
All right,
And so
gotcha.
if they want to say they don't believe in a God, they have to define this word God. And so yeah, I just look at the ancient Egyptians and they believed their leaders were gods. And that was something like a title that even like the judges and throughout the Old Testament, they would be referred to as gods. They'd get that title being God's representative. And so if you want to say that judges don't exist, that's on you.
All right, excellent. So we'll continue on here. Matt Lay sends in $2. I hope I said that right. It says, "When does the Mormonism debate start?" So we can move on from that comment there. For $10, Rihanna Randall says, "Okay, Book of Abraham. Joe translated Egyptian and said it was written by Abraham. Then it was actually translated and turns out to be a basic funerary test. Please explain how that's not a con."
Please explain how that's not a con. Well, we can look at the book of Abraham and do a deeper study on that if we have time. So, yeah, that's all I can say on that.
Okay. And how are you fellows doing for time right now? Because we have a couple questions in the live chat, but we're getting near the end of the super chats here. So we can keep going with some of the other questions that we had in there. It's up to you fellows entirely.
Sure, I got one super chat from my end. Kyle, I see similarities between your hair and Hitler's. How heavily were you influenced by him?
See similarities?
Yep.
I don't know.
So that one's a little bit too on the attacking the person side of things, but appreciate that, TJump. There we go. Yeah, we have another one in here for $5. Brigham Young taught that both the moon and sun were inhabited by people. Has the Mormon Church ever found scientific evidence of that to be true?
I haven't seen any scientific evidence of Brigham Young ever saying that. And so he's been attributed with saying a lot of different things. Exactly how many of those things he actually said, I don't know.
Hey, Joe,
I
how's it
think we'd
going?
have to kind of cross that bridge when we can see the evidence for it.
Okay. Gotcha. And our last super chat, for the super chat questions so far, we have that bandana guy. It says, "Kyle, do you agree that any contradiction proves that it's false? If you say no, then you have a different standard for moon landing versus Mormonism."
Any contradiction for, okay. Well, when it comes to the scriptures, I look at like a whole collection of things. Okay. And so I kind of test it out piece by piece. And so I can say, okay, this part's true, this part's true, this part's true. Oh, but I'm not really sure about this part. And so, but I'm going to go and look for other things. And so I was talking about this with the Bible recently. Okay. The Bible talks about a place called Jerusalem. Does Jerusalem exist? Okay. Jerusalem does exist. That part of the Bible is true. Okay. Well, it also talks about a place called Egypt. Does Egypt exist? Okay, yes, Egypt is an actual place that does exist. Okay, that part of the Bible is true. And it also talks about the Red Sea. Is there a Red Sea between Jerusalem and Egypt? Oh, yes, that does exist. Okay, that part of the Bible is true. And so we can break it down into multiple pieces, and then all those pieces together make one big thing, one much larger picture. But if, okay, well, it says something about corn in Jerusalem. They planted corn. Did they have corn at the time? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe that's an error in translation. And so that part might not be true, but does it disprove the entire book? It disproves part of that book, not the entire book.
All right, excellent. So yeah, while we wait for more super chats, if you guys aren't in a hurry to go anywhere, I get some regular questions that I pulled out of the chat that might be of interest conversation here. If you guys want to stick around for those. So I have here from Joe Doman asked earlier on, what supernatural events has Kyle seen, if any?
What supernatural events have I seen, if any? I've seen quite a few. Kind of like, yeah, I talk about some of the dreams I've had on my channel. I've had different dreams that have been significant and have meant something to me. Learning things that I'd never known about before. Like I didn't know what treacle was, and now I had a dream. Recently, I had this dream where I spoke with John Wesley Powell, and then I was like, "Okay, what's your favorite food?" And he tells me it's like a treacle smoothie. And I woke up and I was like, "It's a really oddly specific dream. Why would I randomly be dreaming about John Wesley Powell?" And yeah, and what's treacle? And so I actually went and looked it up. And John Wesley Powell's an actual person who was kind of famous explorer in the Midwest. I knew about that vaguely, but I had no idea what treacle is, and so I didn't even know how to spell it. So I went and started looking around online to try and figure out what treacle is, and I figured out how to spell it, and found out that treacle is a kind of molasses, a molasses that was back in John Wesley Powell's day. It's the right time period, and it was a drink additive. So I thought that was interesting. So that's kind of one example. I could talk all day about other examples that I've had or my ancestors have had, but I think, yeah, we'll give some time for other people.
Okay. Yeah, I do have one here as well for TJump. Somebody made a commentary on, they said that you said the phrase, the science of history, and they had a bunch of question marks. I'm not sure if you had said that or if you had commentary on that, but
Yeah, history is a science. The field of history is one of the fields of science. I'm not sure it has a methodology. The methodology can be used to verify claims. History is a science. It's one of the soft sciences. I don't understand the question exactly.
I think he's looking for the methodology of history and how you use specifically like the scientific method in history. It's not really something that you do as much testing with, maybe.
Well, you do actually. There's lots of them. Archaeological testing, so you make novel predictions about where you'll find. Like they did this for the population of the Promised Land after the Exodus. They made predictions about how many pots and huts and things they would find when they dug up every inch of land from the location. And they did this, and they found that the population was significantly smaller and never had a massive increase. So they do the same novel tested predictions in history that they do in every science.
all right, awesome. Yeah, so we got another super chat in here, $1.99 from Kyle. Sorry, not from Kyle, sorry, from Coffee Mom. Says, Kyle, New York exists. Is Spider-Man true?
No,
No. Okay.
but that part of Spider-Man is true. So
Okay. Any comment from you there, T-Jump, or good on that?
Well, it's a perfect analogy for his argument. The fact that there is one similarity between two stories doesn't mean that the two stories are inspired by one another. I think that the better way to phrase it would be something like, was Spider-Man influenced by a different story that had New York in it because they both have New York? Well, no, they could both just have learned about New York in completely separate ways. It doesn't necessarily entail that one story would have been inspired by another. They can both come to the same New York example of a fact without actually having been inspired by one another.
okay, what about Ninja Turtles and the movie that just Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man #2, and Ninja Turtles, the whole plot line of mutating the world, climbing up to this big tower and having this big epic battle on top of the tower. We see commonalities in both movies.
Yeah, those are
It's
tropes.
kind of like the same
there's
plot.
there's lots and lots of tropes that are very similar between movies that have absolutely no relation to one another. So like fights on big towers is something that's happened in tens of thousands of movies. That does not mean that they are all inspired by one super movie that happened first that had battles on towers. Um, there are common
Well, it's
themes.
kind of trying to spread mutagen all over the place, and so Spider-Man 2, they're trying to turn
Well,
everyone into the lizards, and then
I have
and
no
the
idea
Shredder
about
and Ninja
Teenage
Turtles wants to turn.
Like I don't know
never
the
saw that
specifics
movie.
of those two stories, so I don't actually know if they're related to one another or not. But I do know that there are tropes in movies there's lots of tropes in movies, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all inspired by the same thing.
Okay, so but we do agree that there are a lot of recycled material that you see all the time in movies, where one movie is
Sure.
definitely influenced by another movie.
Sure.
So all of a sudden, if we see another movie come out there that has people living in a computer program, you're going to say, wow, and you're going to immediately go start looking for similarities to like The Matrix or something like that, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's influenced by the Matrix, because there are movies that exist independently came up with these stories without watching the Matrix. Like the fact that they have the same story doesn't mean that they originated from the same source material.
Okay. I think the more recent one is I read the book I, Robot, and I see that book influencing tons of other movies out there from similar concepts, like Mother. If you've ever watched that one on Netflix, that one's very much kind of borrowing from I, Robot.
All right, excellent. Yeah, we have another one in here from That Bandana Guy. Another one for $10. And he asks Kyle, then you don't have the same standard in thought when it comes to evidence. In the moon debate, you said the moon landing was fake because of contradictions, but yet not in Mormonism, question mark, dishonest. He's coming at you a little bit there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd have to go into more detail than just that. Like he's got to substantiate his claims.
All right, excellent. So yeah, that was the last super chat there. Let me just move over to some of the other questions I had here. Master Optics asks, what does architecture have to do with Mormonism?
What does architecture have to do with the Book of Mormon? And so the Book of Mormon specifically talks about a group of Israelites with that Hebrew Egyptian culture coming to the Americas. And that's kind of like a major theme in the Book of Mormon from, most of the Book of Mormon here talks about that family coming to Americas and then growing from there. And so a lot of that is directly all about that. And so we're talking about Mormonism. I'm talking about the Book of Mormon. And so, yeah, great book. It has a lot of different details on that. And so there's a lot of really fine things about it that I'm just going to say that Joseph Smith, there's no way he could have known that, such as the Codex is here.
Yeah, so his architecture argument made logical sense if there was lots of architectural similarities between Israel and the Aztecs. That would be good evidence that they influenced one another. So that I think the question didn't understand the logic of his argument, which it was a logical argument. I just don't think it's true.
Okay.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so we have another super chat here. Let me just look at this, just give me a second. So from Montiero, $2 says, why did Joe copy Freemason rituals into his temple?
Why is there Masonic like similarities within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Well, Joseph Smith saw a lot of things, and when he saw certain things, those things inspired him. And so from like ancient days. And so that's kind of what opened his eyes. And so the way that was currently being used was wrong. And so it's about a restoration, taking things that are currently being misused and correcting those things and using them the right way.
All right,
And
gotcha.
so I'll also point out that Masons killed Joseph Smith. They were the ones who murdered him. When he was dying, he was calling out to the Masons he recognized in the group of people. So
All right, awesome. And so sorry there, Kalados, that I missed your super chat there. Khaled had sent in a $20 super chat, asked if Kyle, if significant cultural similarities between Israelites and Aztecs existed, then how come we don't see it in significant cultural practices such as warfare? Why were they so different?
there's a lot of time. And so these ancient Israelites came in around like 600 BC. And so there's from 600 BC and then going on, there was a lot of time for them to be influenced by other cultures around them. It never said that they got here to an uninhabited place. It actually says they got here and that there were other people here. And so other tribes that they were influenced by. And so there's a lot more mixing going on there than just, okay, it's a direct influence, only one line of influence.
All right, excellent. Sorry if I seem like I'm coming at you there, Kyle. I got a lot
You're
of
right.
questions here for you from the super chats. Just bear with me here while I just scroll up here. My apologies. I just lost that one there. So yeah, there we go. How many wives from Toy Ranch for $5? How many wives did Joseph Smith have? If your answer is less than 30, look it up.
I've specifically looked into the number of wives, and so a lot of those things are kind of like hearsay. There are other ones that are much more specific, and people, oh yes, we were married, and so I'm going to say more than one. I can feel confident in saying that. I could say as much as 10, but I don't know. A lot of the details after that gets kind of wishy-washy, and so yeah.
All right.
But yeah, whether or not Joseph Smith had 10 wives or 100 wives, that doesn't really disprove the Book of Mormon. It just kind of says, okay, that Joseph Smith had a lot of wives. Doesn't prove the Book of Mormon is wrong.
All right. Excellent. And that bandana guy struck again for $5. Says, Kyle, in the Book of Mormon, people getting baptized in Jesus' name before Jesus was born, just to name one of my many contradictions. So I think he's saying, yeah, that people were getting baptized according to the Book of Mormon before Jesus was born.
They seem to think that baptism was a new thing in the New Testament, that that John the Baptist suddenly started baptizing people. I don't think that's the case, and I don't know what's giving him that indication that baptism was a new thing in the New Testament, not an old thing that kind of went before Jesus was born.
Well, to our super chatters credit here, they said that specifically that they were being baptized in the name of Jesus. I think that's kind of the specific thing that he was honing in on there.
In the name of Jesus. And so the Book of Mormon was translated into English. And so I understand that Jesus's name was actually Joshua, and the Hebrew, kind of Yeshua, but it was kind of the Aramaic was closer to Jesus or something like that, and so we ended up kind of going with it that way. So there's different pronunciations, but it was translated into a language that we can understand and kind of, yeah.
Yeah, Cal's right.
Excellent.
Baptism predated Christianity. It was
Thank
done in Judaism prior to Christianity.
All
Also,
right,
there's several other religious sects that did it outside of Judaism.
That's really interesting. Kind of looking into that. That's kind of one of those markers for me, kind of one influencing another. If you're finding baptisms in other locations, just randomly, that'd be very peculiar.
All right, excellent. So I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I got $5 from Heinrich van Nieuwenhausen. Sorry about that. His question is, Kyle, you are putting too much emphasis on your intuition. Do you do anything to counter your biases? How would someone else independently verify these commonalities without your intuition?
without my intuition. So when I'm thinking of intuition, I'm just thinking about my brain and my ability to think for myself. And so they're trying to ask me, what's a way I can think about this without thinking about it?
The question is you think there's a connection between these two things based on your intuition. How do you show there's actually a connection between these two things and it's not random chance? That's the question.
So you're trying to just eliminate bias here, not just thinking about taking my brain out of it.
Yeah, so it's like he's saying that you have an intuition, that is your bias. He's saying, how do you show this is actually a connection and not just a figment of your bias?
Well, this is kind of where I started out by talking about the word evidence. And so my head is warm, okay, and it feels warm. That's evidence that I might have a fever? Is it proof that I have a fever? No, because my hand might just be cold. And so that's all I did was present this as evidence. If you want proof, it comes down to building that relationship with God for yourself, getting answers to your prayers, witnessing the miracles for yourself. And that's what ultimately puts it down for in the end for proof that you don't believe in. So I understand you don't believe in proof. That's why I didn't go straight for the proof. I wanted to kind of build on common ground.
Awesome. All right. And we have good question here. Making a declaration for $5. They say the Book of Mormon is false because there were no horses in America until the Spaniards.
All right. Well, TJump started off by disagreeing that there were different parts of America that had horses and other parts that didn't. So I'll take that common ground for what it is.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Rihanna Randall, $5. The first edition of the Book of Mormon was written in the Trinitarian view. Only later did Joe split the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Why do you think that is?
I think that there's room for additional revelations that kind of came into play down the road. And so I think he was learning about things as time went on.
All right. Excellent. And just bear with me here. I got to scroll up because we got quite a few super chats come in. Just bear with me here. All right. So Dion, $5 says, if the Book of Mormon is true, why do Native Americans fail to turn white when they become Mormons?
Because they don't need to. I think that'd be kind of strange, really. It's not like there was a reason for a distinguishing factor, and what's the reason at this point?
All right, gotcha there. Rihanna Randall again. Why so many contradictions between the first versions? Don't sidestep. They have come in the side chat, so they want a real direct answer for this question here. Why so many contradictions between the many first versions?
The many first versions, they're being very specific about this, about some kind of contradictions, but they're not pointing at any specific contradictions. There are contradictions, but what contradictions? So it's not specific enough for me to answer.
All right, gotcha. Montiero for $2 asks, why does LDS refuse to excavate the hill Cumorah?
Why do they refuse to excavate it? I don't know if they haven't heard of the history with it, but a lot of people have been digging up that whole hill like throughout history. Before it was bought, treasure hunters would go all over that hill trying to find additional gold. And so I don't know why they'd need to find further excavations when a lot of other people done. So I don't know. Maybe they're holding it like sacred. They do kind of treat it like a sacred ground. And so I don't know. That's the best answer I can give you.
All right, excellent. Rihanna Randall again strikes for $10. The church says marriage is between one man and one woman. Not true, though, is it? Question mark. The prophet and the oaks had 2 wives and will practice polygamy, correct?
The prophet and the oak. I'm not sure what he's referring to there, but I just can point to ancient prophets. It was not like a new thing. Joseph Smith said, hey, we're kind of going for a restoration of all things, and in the Bible, and so that was kind of one of the things that was taught historically in the Bible. We look at Abraham, and he had multiple wives, and so yeah, so he ended up having multiple wives as well.
All right. Awesome. That bandana guy, $5 again. So the last question they'd asked was about the baptism timeline. So they did message back to clarify. They say, no, Kyle, I am talking about the timeline. Jesus wasn't born. Therefore, you can't be baptized in the name of Jesus.
You can't be baptized in the name of Jesus before Jesus was born. I don't know where they're coming from with that.
I think their first question was implying that there's a claim maybe in Mormonism that people were being baptized in the name of Jesus before his birth. I'm not sure if that's something.
Yeah,
you're aware
well,
of, but
that's taught in the
that's
Book
what
of
he's
Mormon,
implying.
like 600 BC, that they knew Jesus was going to come. Like, there's a lot of prophecies, even in the Old Testament, of the coming Messiah. And so they were being baptized in the name of this coming Messiah. And so I don't know, like, there's a lot of prophecies about him coming. And so I don't really see where they're coming from on why. Oh, how did they know? Well, a lot of people knew. We just look at like all of the parallels when it comes to Moses and Jesus. And yeah, there's a lot of parallels between that. I can look at Joseph in Egypt. Joseph in Egypt, there's a lot of parallels between him and Christ. And yeah, there's just tons and tons of them. And so like all of the scriptures point to Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life.
We almost done.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've only got a few more super chats here to wrap up. From Rihanna Randall, $10. Your proof is the promise and the prayer, which every other faithful theist has. How can you say they're wrong if you came to different conclusions the same way? Is faith a reliable path to truth?
I'm not really aware of too many other religions out there that teach we can know through prayer. Like, yeah, I don't see the Buddhists saying, yes, you guys can pray, and then Buddha is going to answer your prayers and work all these miracles in your life. I've never heard that before. So exactly where this is coming from, I don't know. So
It's enlightenment, not prayer, but yeah, they do.
Okay. Skeptics and scoundrels. I will let you fellas know in the live chat that we're going to wrap it up here in the next few minutes. So yeah, we'll get these questions done up here, as I think TJump's ready to call it a debate. Kyle, you claim similarities between two. Oh, sorry, I'll start from the top here. Skeptics and scoundrels, $10 says, Kyle, you claim the similarities between two cultures as evidence of a relationship. For just a moment, let's pretend you're wrong. How would you come to realize that? How would you falsify that idea? So he's asking if there's something that could falsify your claim.
how could that be falsified? I don't know. It's kind of, for me, the one I've been thinking about a lot lately is just like, okay, how can you prove that the Earth is a globe at this point? And so that's just kind of the picture that I've got in my mind is, okay, well, at this point, you'd have to like crumple it, like take a pancake and crumple it into a ball, and that's how you prove a pancake is like, how do you prove that this pancake is flat and not a ball? And so yeah, it was like, I can't prove that this pancake is not a ball. It's a flat pancake. And so it's kind of the same thing with this, is I can't falsify it. It's kind of so blatantly obvious.
I forgot you were a flat earther.
Yes, I'm a flat earther. So
All right, Brian Jenkins, $4.99. Kyle, why does Smith have extramarital affairs with dozens of women and only received his revelation of plural marriage after Emma became suspicious?
again, that's a open claim. There's a lot of people who throw things at him and smear things at him, but yeah, that's got to prove that they actually happened first.
All right, excellent. Well, yeah, we'll whip through these last couple chats here, and then we're gonna wrap it up here. They just keep coming in. Kyle, the issue now, I don't know who to trust, you or the other religion's weak evidence is when the conclusion can equally be substituted for the arguments.
Well, I say I'm not telling you to trust me. I'm not telling you to trust the religion. I'm telling you to trust our Heavenly Father. Let him speak for himself. God speaks, not just spoke. God speaks. His works are without end, and his words never cease. That's the phrase I'm going for.
Awesome. Good question. $5 for TJump. TJump, the last American horse died 10,000 years ago during the glacial age, and they were three-toed horse-like mammals.
Sure, that's horses in America.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Why couldn't Montiero for $2. Why couldn't Joseph Smith re-reveal the stolen Book of Mormon pages?
Why couldn't Joseph Smith re-reveal the stolen Book of Mormon pages? I don't see why he couldn't have. It just wasn't there for him. That was it.
All right.
It comes from, it's revelation from our Heavenly Father, and unless he gives it to him, it's not going to happen.
All right. Excellent. Well, that's the end of our super chat. So I think that will conclude our discussion here for today. So I'd just like to say thanks to TJump, Kyle, for coming out and debating, and everybody in the live chat there giving me an easy time on my debut here doing the moderation. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Peace out.
All right.